In this courtroom, I see thousands of faces every year. Some are etched with the lines of worry, some with the exhaustion of poverty, and some with the quiet pride of a life well lived. As a judge, I've learned that a person's face is a map of their choices. When I look at someone, I don't just see a defendant, I see a son, a daughter, or a grandfather. I see the story they've written for themselves. But today, I am looking at a story that feels cold. Look closely at the young woman standing to my right. This is Brittany. In the study of physiognomy, the art of reading character through the face, there is a certain tightness around the eyes of those who have never been told no. It's a look of permanent expectation. Her skin is flawless, unweathered by the sun or the biting wind of a morning shift. She carries herself with a rigid, porcelain-like grace, as if the very floor of this municipal court is beneath her. Then, look at the man to my left, Mr. Henderson. He is 68 years old. His face is a different kind of map. It's a map of the seasons. There are deep, honest furrows on his brow, the kind you get from squinting into the sun for 40 years to make sure a garden is perfect. His hands, look at his hands. They are thick, weathered, and stained with the honest dust of the earth. In my world, those are the hands of a hero. Those are the hands that built this country. The case before me seems simple on paper. $1,800. For Brittany, that's perhaps a weekend getaway or a new pair of boots. For Mr. Henderson, that is his rent. That is his groceries. That is the dignity of his labor. He spent weeks transforming her estate, planting oaks that will outlive us all. And yet, he stands here today, hat in hand, asking for what is rightfully his. When I asked Brittany why the payment was withheld, I expected a misunderstanding. I expected a clerical error. I always look for the good in people, but what I received instead was a chill that filled the entire room. She didn't look at Mr. Henderson. She didn't even look at the evidence. She looked at her gold watch, let out a sigh of pure annoyance, and leaned into the microphone. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp like a blade of ice. "Judge," she said, with a dismissive wave of her hand, "do you even know what my salary is? My time is calculated in 5-minute increments that cost more than this man's entire invoice. I simply don't have the capacity to manage the petty complaints of the help." The courtroom went silent. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. I felt a weight in my chest, not of anger, but of a profound sadness. For many of you watching at home, you know this feeling. You felt that sting when someone looks right through you because you're wearing a uniform or carrying a toolbox. You know the pain of being invisible to the powerful. I looked at Mr. Henderson. He didn't say a word. He just lowered his head, his calloused fingers trembling slightly as they gripped the edge of the podium. It wasn't just the money she was stealing from him. It was his worth as a human being. Brittany thought she was pointing out her status. She thought her salary made her the biggest person in the room, but she was about to find out that in Judy's court, your bank account doesn't give you height. Your character does. And right now, she was looking very, very small. I leaned back, took off my glasses, and looked her straight in the eye. I wasn't going to yell. I was going to do something much worse. I was going to tell her the truth. I want everyone in this courtroom to take a moment and look at the contrast between these two podiums. In the world of physiognomy, the study of a person's character through their physical form, we say that the hands never lie. On one side, we have Brittany's hands. They are perfectly manicured, adorned with rings that likely cost more than a modest home in this city. They are the hands of someone who has spent her life signing papers, swiping cards, and pointing at things she wants others to do. There is a softness there, but also a tension, a tightness in the way she grips her designer bag that suggests she is always guarding her status. Then, look at Mr. Henderson. Look at those knuckles. They are swollen from years of gripping the handles of a heavy mower. Look at the skin. It's darkened and toughened by the sun. Those are what I call the hands of honor. Those are the hands that built the gardens we walk through. The hands that tucked their grandchildren into bed after a day of back-breaking work. In my eyes, those calluses are more precious than any diamond ring because they represent a life of service and honesty. Brittany, you mentioned your salary. You mentioned that your time is too valuable to be wasted on a petty complaint. I want to understand your logic. Did Mr. Henderson do the work? Did he plant the 50 oaks? Did he install the irrigation system that keeps your lawn green while the rest of the neighborhood browns in the heat? He was there, yes, Brittany replies, her voice dripping with a casual, corporate coldness. But my architect felt the placement of the northern oaks was slightly off-center. It ruined the symmetry of the driveway. I told my assistant to put the final payment on hold until he corrected it. I'm a perfectionist, Judge. When I pay for a luxury service, I expect luxury results. My father's company didn't become a billion-dollar empire by accepting good enough, and frankly, chasing me into a courtroom for a measly $1,800 is just, it's gauche. The word gauche, meaning unsophisticated or tacky, ripples through the audience like a physical blow. For many in this room, $1,800 isn't gauche. It's the difference between a peaceful month and a desperate one. Gauche, I repeat the word slowly, as if tasting something bitter. Mr. Henderson, why didn't you correct the symmetry of those oaks? Mr. Henderson leans into the microphone. His voice is raspy, the sound of a man who has spent more time working than talking. Your Honor, I offered to move them, but that was 4 months ago. Every time I showed up, the gate was locked. Every time I called, her assistant told me she was in Dubai, or Aspen, or New York. I have bills, sir. My grandson's college tuition was due, and I've had to take out a high-interest loan just to keep him in school, because this money never came. I look back at Brittany. Her expression hasn't changed. She is still the picture of porcelain grace, her jaw set in a rigid line of defiance. In psychology, we call this devaluation. To Brittany, Mr. Henderson isn't a person with a grandson. He is a broken tool that failed to provide symmetry. You locked the gates, Brittany? I ask. Security protocols, she shrugs. I can't have vendors wandering onto the property without an appointment. And I was busy. As I said, my salary reflects a level of responsibility that requires my constant travel. I can't be expected to manage a gardener's schedule. I nod slowly. I take off my glasses and set them on the bench. You think your salary makes you important, but you've confused price with value. You know the price of everything, but you clearly know the value of nothing. I want you to look at these photographs on the monitor. These are images of the estate after Mr. Henderson finished his labor. Look at those 50 mature oaks. In the study of character, trees like these represent the very essence of endurance and deep roots, the stability of a man's word. Mr. Henderson didn't just dig holes in the dirt. He used his strength to plant a legacy that will provide shade for your children and your children's children. He gave your property a soul. Brittany, as I look at these photos, I'm looking at you too. There is a specific way the brow darkens when someone is trying to justify the unjustifiable. You claimed the symmetry was off. You claimed the aesthetic was ruined. But Mr. Henderson just testified that 4 months ago you were standing among these very trees, bragging to your social circle that you had hand-picked them to make the estate look regal. So, which is it? Were they regal when you were showing off to your friends? Or were they defective when it came time to open your checkbook? You see, in this courtroom, we don't just look at contracts, we look at the truth. And the truth is written in the timeline. You didn't complain about symmetry while the heavy machinery was on site. You didn't complain while Mr. Henderson was wiping the sweat from his eyes in 90-degree heat. You waited until the gates were locked. You waited until he was on the outside looking in. And then you used your assistant as a human shield to avoid paying a debt that is, by your own admission, pocket change. Mr. Henderson, when you realized the gates were locked, what did you do? The elderly man leans forward, his voice steady but tired. I went back 3 times, Your Honor. I left notes. I called. I just wanted to finish the job to her liking so I could pay for my grandson's books. I've been doing this for 45 years. My reputation is all I have. Brittany, look at him. Really look at him. You mentioned your salary. You mentioned your time. But Mr. Henderson's time is finite. At 68 years old, every hour he spends laboring in the sun is a sacrifice of his remaining strength. When you steal $1,800 from a man like this, you aren't just stealing money, you are stealing the hours of his life that he can never get back. Your architect's opinion on symmetry is not a legal defense for bad faith. You used this man's expertise to increase the value of your home by tens of thousands of dollars, and then you tried to stiff him on the bill because you thought he was too small to fight back. But you forgot one thing, Brittany. In this city, no one is too small for justice, and no salary is high enough to excuse a lie. I want you to listen to me very carefully, Brittany. You've mentioned your salary 3 times since you stepped into this courtroom. You speak about it as if it were a badge of honor, a shield that protects you from the common decency we owe one another as human beings. But I want to tell you something about wealth that you clearly haven't learned in your boardrooms or on your private jets. True wealth isn't the number at the bottom of your bank statement. True wealth is the ability to look at a man like Mr. Henderson, a man who has spent nearly 7 decades working with his hands and recognized that his time is just as sacred as yours. When you looked at me and asked if I knew your salary, you weren't just being arrogant, you were being foolish. Because in this room, your salary is zero, your status is defendant, and the only thing that has any value here is the integrity of your character. By withholding this payment, you didn't prove you were powerful, you proved that you are morally bankrupt. You chose to use your high-value time to manufacture a lie about symmetry just to keep $1,800 from a grandfather who earned it in the dirt. Mr. Henderson, I want you to look at me. I see you. I see the work you've done. I see the pride you take in your craft. And I want to apologize to you on behalf of a society that sometimes forgets that men like you are the very foundation upon which people like Brittany build their empires. Without your hands, her regal estate would be nothing but a barren field of weeds. Brittany, you look at those calluses on his hands and you see something to be avoided. I look at those calluses and I see a life of honesty. I see a man who doesn't need an assistant to tell him right from wrong. You think you are winning because you have the power to lock a gate. But justice doesn't need a key. Justice is a mirror, and today I am holding that mirror up to your face. I want you to see the ugliness of your entitlement. I want you to feel the weight of what it means to be a person who would rather lie than pay a debt of honor. Your perfectionism is nothing more than a mask for your greed. And today, that mask is coming off. We are going to find a symmetry of our own, the symmetry of a fair payment for a fair day's work. I want to turn our attention away from the balance sheets and back to the human heart. Mr. Henderson, you told me earlier that this $1,800 was meant for your grandson's college books and tuition. You took out a loan, a debt on your own shoulders just to make sure his future wouldn't be as heavy as your past. Brittany, look at this man's face. In the practice of physiognomy, we look at the lifelines around the mouth. In Mr. Henderson, those lines are deep because he has spent a lifetime holding his breath through the pain to get the job done. They are the marks of a provider. When you look at him, you see a gardener. When I look at him, I see a bridge. He is the bridge that his grandson is walking across to reach a better life. And what did you do? You tried to collapse that bridge. You didn't just withhold money, you withheld a grandfather's promise. You sat in your climate-controlled office, calculated your high-value hourly rate, and decided that your desire to save a few dollars was more important than a young man's education. You used your power to create a crisis for a family that actually understands the meaning of the word work. I've spent a lifetime on this bench, and if there is one thing I have learned, it is this. The most expensive things in life are the ones that have no price tag. Respect is free, yet you couldn't afford it. Kindness costs nothing, yet you acted as if it would bankrupt you. You think you are standing tall because of your father's name. But a name is just a hollow sound if it isn't backed by character. Mr. Henderson's name is written in the soil of this city. It's written in the trees that will provide shade long after your salary is spent and forgotten. I'm going to ask you one more time, and I want you to think about your soul, not your bank account. When you saw this man working in the heat, did you ever once think about the person behind the tools? Or did you only see a silhouette that made your driveway look regal? Brittany, I've been sitting on this bench for many years, and I have seen people from all walks of life. I've seen people who had nothing but were willing to share their last crust of bread. And I've seen people who had everything but couldn't spare a single kind word. In the world of physiognomy, we often say that the light of the soul shines through the eyes. When I look at Mr. Henderson, despite the tiredness, I see a light of quiet fulfillment. He has worked hard, he has provided for his family, and he stands here with a clear conscience. But when I look at you, Brittany, I see a shadow. It's the shadow of entitlement. It's the shadow that grows when a person starts to believe that their bank account is a substitute for their character. You mentioned that $1,800 is pocket change to you. If that is true, then your refusal to pay it is even more sinister. It means you didn't withhold the money because you needed it. You withheld it simply because you could. You wanted to exert power over someone you deemed lesser than yourself. You talked about luxury results. But the greatest luxury in this life isn't a manicured lawn or a fleet of expensive cars. The greatest luxury is the ability to walk down the street and know that you haven't stepped on anyone to get where you are. It's the luxury of being a person of your word. Mr. Henderson, you've waited 4 months for this money. You've endured the locked gates, the dismissive assistants, and the cold silence of a woman who thought you weren't worth her time. I want you to know that in this courtroom, your time is valued, your sweat is respected, and your dignity is not for sale. Brittany, you think your salary makes you a leader in this community, but a true leader protects those who work for them. A true leader understands that the person who trims the hedges is just as vital to the home as the person who owns the deed. By treating Mr. Henderson this way, you haven't just failed a gardener, you have failed the very community that allowed your family to thrive. I'm looking at the clock, and my time is also valuable, but I will spend every second necessary to make sure you understand this. You can buy symmetry, you can buy luxury, and you can buy silence, but you cannot buy the respect of this court if you do not show it to others. I want you to look at Mr. Henderson one more time, Brittany. Do you see the way he stands? He is not leaning on a fancy mahogany desk or hiding behind a team of lawyers. He is standing on his own 2 feet, supported by the weight of a lifetime of honest labor. In the study of human character, we look at the center of gravity. A person who is right in their soul stands firm. A person who is hiding behind a lie like you are doing right now tends to shift, to fidget, to look for the nearest exit. You've spent this entire hearing trying to negotiate the value of a man's life. You treated this $1,800 as if it were a starting point for a bargain. But justice is not a boardroom meeting. You don't get to circle back to the truth when it's convenient for your schedule. You admitted the work was done. You admitted the trees were regal. Your only defense is a fabricated story about symmetry that you used as a padlock to keep your money in your pocket. In my court, we don't reward people for being clever at the expense of being kind. We don't allow those with high salaries to treat the rest of the world as if they are disposable. I am looking at your father's name on the documents you submitted. It is a name that carries weight in this city. But names are like the trees, Mr. Henderson planted. If they aren't watered with integrity, they rot from the inside out. Today, you have brought shame to that name. You have shown that you are willing to tarnish a legacy over a sum of money that you yourself called pocket change. And what about you, Mr. Henderson? You took out a loan. You paid interest on money you had already earned. You sacrificed your own peace of mind to ensure your grandson had a future. That, Brittany, is what high-value responsibility actually looks like. It's not about how much you make. It's about who you take care of. I am prepared to make my ruling. But before I do, I want you to look at the checkbook you have in your bag. I want you to think about every zero you've written for your handbags, your travel, and your luxury aesthetics. And then I want you to realize that not a single one of those purchases will ever buy you the respect that Mr. Henderson earned just by waking up and doing his job. The gates to your estate might be high, Brittany, but they aren't high enough to keep out the truth. And the truth has finally caught up with you. I have listened to all the testimony, and I have looked at the evidence of the work performed. More importantly, I have looked at the character of the 2 people standing before me. In life, we often find that the world is a mirror. What you give to it eventually comes back to you. Brittany, you have spent this hearing trying to use your high salary as a weapon to diminish a man who has done nothing but provide you with honest service. You spoke of symmetry in your driveway, but you ignored the lack of symmetry in your soul. You cannot enjoy the shade of trees planted by a man you refuse to pay. That is not how a civil society functions, and it is certainly not how this courtroom functions. Mr. Henderson, I want you to know that your hard work is seen. Those calluses on your hands are not a sign of the help. They are a badge of a lifetime of contribution. You shouldn't have had to take out a loan, and you shouldn't have had to stand here today to ask for what is yours. Therefore, it is the judgment of this court that the defendant, Brittany, will pay the full invoice of $1,800 immediately. Furthermore, because Mr. Henderson was forced to take out a high-interest loan due to your bad faith delay, I am adding the interest costs and the maximum allowable court fees to that judgment. But I'm not finished. Brittany, you said your time is worth thousands of dollars an hour. Well, today, your time belongs to the community. In addition to the financial judgment, I am sentencing you to 40 hours of community service, and you won't be doing it in an office. You will be working with the city's parks department, under the sun, planting trees in our public spaces. Perhaps, after a week of digging in the dirt, you will finally understand the aesthetic of hard work. Justice is not just about a check, Brittany. It's about balance. Today, we have restored the symmetry that actually matters. Mr. Henderson, give my best to your grandson. I hope his books lead him to a bright future, and I hope he grows up to have hands as honorable as yours. Case closed.